Welcome back to Truth Serum. Today we're going to be diving deep into the Great Reset.
Oh, yeah. This is a big one.
It really is. It seems like everyone's talking about it these days. Some say it's the key to a better future, while others see it as something a lot more sinister.
Well, there's certainly a lot of speculation flying around.
Yeah, for sure. So we're going to try to cut through all the noise and get to the heart of the matter. What exactly is the Great Reset? Where did it come from, and what does it actually mean for you and me and everyone else?
Those are the big questions.
They are. So let's start by going back to the beginning. Where did this whole Great Reset thing come from?
Well, it was officially launched by the World Economic Forum, or WEF, back in 2020.
Right in the thick of the COVID-19 pandemic.
Yeah, it was a time when the world was in a state of shock and uncertainty.
Absolutely. Everything felt like it was changing overnight.
And the WEF saw this as an opportunity, a chance to rethink the way we do things globally.
So they saw the pandemic as a sort of catalyst for change.
Exactly. They believed that the old systems were broken and that we needed a new approach to address the challenges facing the world.
Okay, so what exactly did they propose? What's their vision for this so-called Great Reset?
Well, the WEF's official stance is that it's about building a more sustainable, equitable, and resilient world.
That's pretty good on paper.
It does. They talk about things like stakeholder capitalism, where
Ah.
businesses prioritize social good alongside profits.
So not just focusing on the bottom line, but considering the impact on employees, communities, the
Yeah.
environment, the whole picture.
Exactly. It's about moving away from a purely profit-driven model to one that considers a wider range of stakeholders.
Interesting. And how do they plan to make this happen? What are some of the specific actions they're proposing?
Well, they have a three-pronged approach. First, they want to steer the market towards fairer outcomes.
So using government intervention and regulations to ensure a more level playing field.
That's one aspect of it. Second, they want to ensure that investments are directed towards shared goals like sustainability and equality.
So putting money where their mouth is, so to speak.
Exactly. And finally, they want to harness the innovations of the Fourth Industrial Revolution for the public good.
Ah, yes, the Fourth Industrial Revolution, artificial intelligence, robotics, all that jazz.
Precisely. They believe that these technologies have the potential to solve some of the world's most pressing problems, but only if they're used responsibly and for the benefit of everyone.
So it's about shaping the future of technology in a way that benefits humanity as a whole.
That's the idea.
Yeah.
But of course, not everyone buys into this rosy vision of the future.
Right. There's a whole other side to this story. The conspiracy theories, the fears, the anxieties surrounding the Great Reset. What are some of the concerns that people have raised?
Well, some people worry that the Great Reset is just a cover for a power grab by elites.
Sort of shadowy cabal controlling the world from behind the scenes.
That's a common fear. And then there's the whole "you'll own nothing and be happy" slogan that the WEF put out a few years ago.
Yeah, that one really freaked people out.
It did. It was taken by many as a sign that the Great Reset was about eliminating private property and forcing everyone into a system of dependence.
And when you combine that with the push towards digital currency and a cashless society, it starts to paint a pretty unsettling picture.
Exactly. Some people fear that a cashless society would give governments and corporations unprecedented control over our finances.
And then there's the potential for social credit systems like they have in China.
Right, where your access to services and opportunities is determined by your behavior and your adherence to certain social norms.
All sounds a bit like a dystopian sci-fi novel.
It does. And it's understandable why people are concerned.
But are these fears justified? Is there any evidence to support these claims, or is it all just speculation and paranoia?
That's what we're here to unpack. We
Mhm.
need to look at the facts, the evidence, and the different perspectives to try to understand what's really going on with this whole Great Reset thing.
Absolutely. Because whether you believe it's a genuine attempt to improve the world or a sinister plot to control it, the Great Reset is happening in one form or another.
It is, and it's important to understand what that means for all of us.
Okay, so we've laid out the basics. Where does the Great Reset come from? What's the WF's vision? And what are some of the concerns that people have? But what does all of this actually mean for our listeners? How might it impact their lives in the years to come?
That's the key question, isn't it? And it's one we're going to delve into in the next part of our deep dive.
Stay tuned
Welcome back.
to Truth Serum. We left off talking about what the Great Reset might mean for everyday people. What are some of the potential impacts we could see in, say, the next 5 to 10 years?
Well, I think one of the most immediate areas where people will feel the effects is in the economy.
That makes sense. When you
Huh.
talk about global shifts, The economy is usually the first thing that comes to mind.
Right. And one of the big things the WF talks about is this transition to a green economy.
Yeah, sustainable development,
Yeah,
renewable energy,
yeah.
all that.
Exactly. And we're already seeing this happening to some extent. Governments and businesses are investing in things like solar and wind power, electric vehicles, sustainable agriculture.
So is the idea that this would just accelerate under the Great Reset?
That's what they're hoping for. But of course, any major economic shift is going to come with disruptions.
What kind of disruptions are we talking about?
Well, for one thing, industries that are heavily reliant on fossil fuels are going to have to adapt, and that could mean job losses in some sectors.
So like coal miners, oil rig workers, people like that.
Yeah, potentially.
Huh.
And while the green economy is supposed to create new jobs, it's not going to be a seamless transition for everyone.
So it's not all sunshine and rainbows, even if the goals are good.
Right. There are always trade-offs. And then there's the whole issue of automation, which is something the WEF talks about quite a bit.
Robots taking over our jobs. That's the classic sci-fi fear.
It's not just science fiction anymore. It's already happening, and it's only going to accelerate in the coming years.
So what does that mean for the average worker?
Well, it means that we need to be thinking about the skills we're going to need in the future. The jobs that are most likely to be automated are the ones that are repetitive and predictable. So we need to be focusing on developing skills that are uniquely human things, like creativity, critical thinking, problem solving, emotional intelligence.
So basically the things that robots can't do.
Exactly. And this is where education and retraining become really important. We need to make sure that people have the opportunity to learn the skills they need to thrive in a future where automation is going to be more and more prevalent.
So it's about adapting to the changing landscape and not getting left behind.
Exactly. And then there's the issue of wealth inequality, which is something that's already a major problem and could potentially be exacerbated by these economic shifts.
Yeah, the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. That's the worry.
Right. And the WEF talks about addressing this through stakeholder capitalism, which we mentioned earlier.
But is that really going to work? Can you really convince corporations to prioritize social good over profits?
It's a tough question. Some people are skeptical. They think it's just a PR stunt, a way for companies to look good without making any real changes.
Like greenwashing, but for social justice.
Yeah, kind of. But others believe that stakeholder capitalism could be a genuine force for good if it's implemented correctly.
So it remains to be seen whether it will live up to its promises.
Exactly. It's definitely something to watch. Now, shifting gears a bit, we can't talk about the Great Reset without talking about technology. It's kind of at the heart of everything.
Yeah, it's the engine driving a lot of these changes.
Absolutely. And one of the big things they talk about is the Internet of Things.
Internet of Things. What exactly does that mean?
Well, it's basically the idea that everything is going to be connected to the internet. Your fridge, your car, your thermostat, your doorbell, even your toothbrush.
My toothbrush. What on earth would my toothbrush need the internet for?
Well, it could track your brushing habits, send you reminders to replace the brush head, order new toothpaste automatically, things like that.
Okay, I can see the convenience factor, but it also sounds a little invasive.
That's the double-edged sword of the Internet of Things. On the one hand, it has the potential to make our lives easier and more efficient, but on the other hand, it raises serious concerns about data privacy and security.
Yeah, who's collecting all that data about my brushing habits?
Yeah!
And what are they doing with it?
That's a valid question, and it's one of the big anxieties around the Great Reset. Some people worry that this level of interconnectedness is going to lead to a surveillance state where everything we do is being monitored and controlled.
So it's not just about convenience, it's about power and control.
Exactly. And then you have things like biotechnology, which is another area that's advancing rapidly.
Okay, biotech. What are we talking about here?
We're talking about things like gene editing, personalized medicine, synthetic biology. It's all very cutting-edge stuff, and it has the potential to revolutionize healthcare agriculture, even our understanding of human nature itself.
It sounds like science fiction.
It does. But it's becoming reality. And while biotech has the potential to do a lot of good, it also raises some serious ethical concerns.
Like what?
Well, things like genetic discrimination designer babies, the creation of a biotech divide between the haves and the have-nots. It's all very complicated.
It sounds like we're opening up a Pandora's box.
In some ways, we are. But we can't just ignore these advancements. We need to be having these conversations, asking the tough questions, and making sure that biotech is used responsibly and for the benefit of all humankind.
So it's not just about the science. It's about the ethics as well.
Exactly. And then, of course, there's artificial intelligence, which is another huge area of development.
AI? Yeah, that's one that everyone's talking about these days.
It is. And for good reason, AI has the potential to transform almost every aspect of our lives, from the way we work to the way we interact with each other.
but it also has the potential to be incredibly dangerous,
Yeah.
right? I mean, we've all seen the Terminator movies.
Well, Hollywood tends to exaggerate things, but there are some legitimate concerns about AI. The biggest one is that we're creating something that we don't fully understand and that could potentially become more intelligent than us.
So we could end up creating our own downfall.
It's a possibility. And that's why there's a lot of discussion in the AI community about safety and ethics. How do we ensure that AI is aligned with human values and that it doesn't pose a threat to our existence?
Those are some pretty big questions.
They are, and they're questions that we need to be thinking about now before it's too late.
So technology is a major factor in all of this. But what about individual freedom? How might the Great Reset impact our personal liberties?
That's a crucial question, and it's one that's generating a lot of debate. There are definitely some potential threats to individual freedom in this evolving landscape, especially with things like the Internet of Things, digital currencies, and the possibility of social credit systems.
It sounds like we could be headed towards a world where everything we do is monitored and controlled.
It's a possibility, and it's something we need to be vigilant about. We need to fight to protect our fundamental rights, our privacy, our freedom of speech, our freedom of thought.
So it's not just about embracing the good things that come with technology. It's about being aware of the potential dangers and pushing back against them.
Exactly. And that's where individual action comes in. We can't just sit back and let things happen to us. We
Yeah.
need to be informed, engaged, and active in shaping the future we want.
So the Great Reset is a call to action.
I think it is. It's a wake-up call. It's a reminder that the world is changing and that we need to be prepared for what's coming.
Okay, so we've talked about the economic impacts, the technological advancements, and the potential threats to individual freedom. But let's shift our focus now to Africa. How might the Great Reset play out on a continent that's often on the receiving end of global trends? That's what we're going to explore in the next part of our deep dive.
Welcome back to Truth Serum and the final part of our Great Reset deep dive.
We've talked about the global picture,
Hmm.
but now it's time to zero in on Africa,
Yeah, a continent that's often overlooked in these big global conversations.
but one that has the potential to be profoundly impacted by the changes we've been discussing.
Exactly. Africa's the youngest continent. It's got this incredible energy and dynamism, and it's growing at an incredible rate.
There's so much potential there. So how does the Great Reset fit into all of this? Is it a threat or an opportunity for Africa?
I think it's both, honestly. It really depends on how African nations choose to navigate this new landscape.
Okay, so let's break it down. What are some of the specific challenges and opportunities that Africa faces in the context of the Great Reset?
Well, one of the big challenges is this whole shifting geopolitical landscape that we've been talking about.
Yeah, the US, Russia, China, they're all kind of jockeying for position on the world stage.
Right, and that creates a lot of uncertainty for African nations. Who do they align with? How do they maintain their independence in this new world order?
Yeah, it's like they're caught in the middle of this power struggle.
Exactly. And it's easy for them to get caught in the crossfire or to become dependent on one of these major powers.
So what's the alternative? How can African nations chart their own course?
Well, I think one of the key things is for them to focus on their own strengths and to build on the progress they've already made.
Like what? Give me some examples.
Well, one area where Africa is already ahead of the curve is technology, especially in areas like mobile banking and digital payments.
Yeah, it's amazing how many people in Africa are using their phones to manage their finances.
It is. And this technological savvy gives them a real advantage in an increasingly digital world.
So they can leverage technology to drive economic growth, create jobs, improve people's lives.
Exactly. And they don't have to follow the same path as the West. They can innovate and create solutions that are tailored to their own unique needs and challenges.
So it's about finding their own African model for development.
I think that's a great way to put it. And then there's the green economy, which is another area where Africa has a lot of potential.
Yeah, with all that sunshine and wind and geothermal energy.
Exactly. Africa has an abundance of renewable energy resources, and they're already starting to harness those resources to power their own development.
So they're not just exporting their raw materials anymore. They're adding value and creating jobs at home.
Right. And they're also addressing the issue of climate change, which is already having a devastating impact on many parts of Africa.
So for African nations, embracing the green economy isn't just about economic opportunity. It's about survival.
Absolutely. Now, of course, none of this is going to be easy. There are still a lot of challenges that African nations need to overcome.
Like what?
Well, governance is a big one. Many African countries still struggle with corruption, instability, and a lack of transparency.
Yeah, those are issues that have held back progress for a long time.
But there are also a lot of positive developments happening. A new generation of leaders is emerging leaders who are more committed to democracy, good governance, and sustainable development.
So there's hope for the future.
I think there is, but it's going to take a lot of hard work, determination, and collaboration both within Africa and with the rest of the world.
So it's not about Africa going it alone.
Mm.
It's about finding partners who share their vision and who are willing to support their efforts.
Exactly. And I think the Great Reset, for all its flaws and anxieties, could actually provide a framework for that kind of collaboration.
Okay, so let's wrap this up. We've talked about the Great Reset. We've talked about the potential impacts, the challenges, the opportunities. But what's the bottom line here? What's the message we want our listeners to take away from all of this?
Well, I think the most important thing is to realize that the world is changing, whether we like it or not. And the Great Reset, whether it's a deliberate plan or just a reflection of these larger forces at play, is a symptom of that change.
It's a wake-up call.
Exactly. It's a reminder that we need to be thinking about the future, about the kind of world we want to live in, and about the role we're going to play in shaping that future.
So it's not about being passive observers. It's about being active participants.
Absolutely. We all have a role to play in this, and it's up to each of us to decide what that role is going to be.
Well said. And on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this episode of Truth Serum. But before we go, we want to hear from you. What are your thoughts on the Great Reset? Do you think it's a force for good or for evil? Are you excited about the future or terrified? Let us know in the comments or on social media. We love hearing from our listeners.
And as always, keep those suggestions coming for future deep dives. We're always on the lookout for new mysteries to explore.
Thanks for tuning in to Truth Serum. Until next time, stay curious, stay skeptical, and stay engaged.
And remember, the truth is out there.